Karthik Damarsetti is a consultant with ThoughtWorks. They are a blogger and are working towards making corporate and professional spaces more inclusive and accessible. Thank you so much, Karthik, for joining us and joining QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2021.
Thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity.
So, Karthik, since you have been with the corporate world for a couple of years now, the first question that I would like to ask is, who do you think are the biggest gatekeepers to inclusion in the corporate world?
I believe that the gatekeepers would be people who don't understand that inclusion is defined in a particular way, because sometimes people have a stereotypical understanding of what is a diverse team, so then they would not look at anything beyond that, and then they would say that is not inclusion or that is inclusion. So they kind of limit the definition of inclusion, and they become the gatekeepers, and they prevent people or corporates from being fully inclusive.
Okay. Parmesh Shahani calls the process of inclusion a combination of micro revolutions. What is your take on this?
A revolution. Can we try and define what is a revolution here? Do we have any definition of revolution you want to go with?
So I think it would necessarily mean how structures are being changed from the inside, and necessarily the ways of living are being changed in a way where it becomes more inclusive, so that everyday life, it's normal to be inclusive. It doesn't have to be something out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I agree to that part, but I just don't want to call it a revolution, because for people who are underrepresented in the industry, right? For them, this is not a new thing. It's a everyday, day of living. It's an everyday struggle, so to say. So, people just want to live their normal lives without doing anything separate or anything special. So I wouldn't call it a revolution in the sense of we're all going to war or doing something drastic, but even the micro level changes. I think that's what I would agree with Parmesh here, saying anything even at a small level you can start building up and going along that. Yesterday we celebrated the International Day of Pronouns, and even just having visibility on people's pronouns on social media, email signatures, all of that enables people to be more inclusive. So that's not a new thing. It's not like a great thing. It's just a small little, regular thing. And once more people start doing it, that kind of builds that environment of inclusion.
No, I think that's very well said. When we talk about inclusion, why do you think that there is a higher, or there is more of a lack of LGBTQ representation in STEM versus arts and humanity? And what do you think can be done to bridge this gap?
And I think if I go back with a historical lens, STEM or science, technology, engineering, math has always been a male-dominated area of study discipline, and it took a long time for women even to come in there, and because it was predominantly like, oh, women don't have that. It just feels awkward for me to even say it out, but women were considered less intelligent to deal with the complexities of STEM. So when you look at that, there's that whole patriarchal kind of thought that only men are more intelligent, more qualified to lead in STEM roles. And that kind of percolated down the social ladder to queer identities, to other underrepresented minorities here. So that's why it becomes like, okay, if you are queer, you start you go into that doubt, that loop of self questioning. Am I even qualified for this? I don't see any other queer person out there. So how would I? Whom do I look forward, or whom do I look at for a role model? I mean, if we take STEM, we had Alan Turing, and we know what happened. He was chemically sentenced to a chemical castration, and he committed suicide. Now, imagine if that was not the case. If he was not sentenced for his homosexuality, but then praised for what he did to help the Allies win the war, where would we be now? So it goes to that level where if you are not from the majority, then you are looked down upon, and that's why we see queer people going more into the arts and humanities space. So I think that's what that kind of answers the first question. Now the second one is, what can be done to bridge the gap? I want to talk about what my company at ThoughtWorks is doing. At an India level, we have something called the Interning with Pride program, where we're trying to get people from the LGBT community into the IT industry, because we see that there's a lot of potential, a lot of talent, and we see a gap. So we're trying to get them into the IT industry, give them an internship program after training, and then take them full time. So that's where, if we see more, kind of initiatives that are focused to the LGBT community and trying to bridge that gap, I think that's what will help. Because right now, a lot of my friends, when I started posting about the 2021 batch for IWP, we were looking for nominations. A lot of people were like, is there anything for arts or design or anything? So it's not just STEM, but a lot of these career paths are, people feel that they're not qualified enough, or they'll be judged when they get into careers, professional career roles. So that becomes that problem. We have to look at what are the systemic problems that people will face, and then try to tackle that.
I think something which you said during the starting was really interesting, and that you said, because historically men have been considered to be smarter, men were the breadwinners or so, and that's why they went into science, and women were supposed to go for arts. Do you think these inequalities also seeped into the LGBTQ community itself? How inclusive do you think the community is from within?
So indeed, yes, because see, even though we identify as queer, the system around us kind of puts men at a higher pedestal. As much as we want to deny that, we want to break that system down of patriarchy, it's always there. Like anything that we do, men are seen as a better position. So these inequalities need to be addressed even within the queer community. And I just learned something recently via social media, that LGBT was actually called GLBT initially, putting gays first and then the lesbians. But then they switched it around because during the AIDS crisis in the US, the lesbians came forward and then helped the community. So then they changed it around just so that they gave the recognition to women out there. So even if you see, a lot of people still call it GLBT community and not the LGBT community. So subconsciously, we still think men are first, women are second. And then of course you have the trans again coming at the end. Why not TG or TLB? TLBGQ or something like that. Why putting the trans at the end?
So, Karthik, do you think that since now more and more conversations are taking place, not just about inequality against the LGBTQ community, but within the community itself, what do you think about the pace of inclusion and the pace of leveling the playing field? Are you happy with it? Do you think it could be much, much better?
I have a counter question there. How many male out, out and queer male role models do we see versus how many women out and queer role models do we see, right? We always see the men are more public about it and the women are not as public, right? So you see an intersection of gender and sexuality coming in there and the power struggle involved. Now, it's not just about one system, but how many people who are from a lower caste coming in and being able to be vocal about being queer and from a lower caste, or someone who is disabled and queer, how many people do you see as role models? So while these conversations are happening about changing the system, they're always happening in silos and never together. There's never a sense of intersectionality in there, and that is my I'm not happy with that. But looking at the bigger conversation, yes, I'm happy that at least something is getting discussed and things are happening.
So, as somebody who has spastic diplegia, how have you come to terms with your double marginalization?
Oh, I know it's been a weird journey for me because I didn't have to come to terms with my spastic diplegia because I was born with it. I mean, I didn't have to think about it other than it's just me. But when it came to my sexuality, I had to go and think, is this normal or am I doing something wrong? Because right from when I can recall, the heteronormative narratives have been thrust. Like everywhere you see it, heteronormativity and not anything to do with other than being straight. So that was the problem. But then then afterwards coming to terms with my sexuality, and then I realized, okay, it's not so easy for me because I have a disability. So it's first I was okay with my disability and not so much with my sexual orientation. Now it's I'm okay with my sexuality but not with my disability coming into play there. So it's it was a sinusoidal wave. It's one time plus and then the other time it's going down. But now I'm coming to terms okay, I need to use both these experiences and then start talking, and I just started my journey in that. I've now it's okay, I'm in a comfortable space regarding both my identities and just trying to do what I can so I can be in a better society and others like me can be in a better society.
So, if I draw upon that, how did you, drawing from a personal experience, how should one approach the intersection of disability and gender when it comes to inclusion?
I think we should recognize that disability also occurs on a spectrum, gender also occurs on a spectrum, and sexual orientation. It's not a black and white thing. All of them are on a spectrum, and we cannot have one solution fitting everyone. We need to potentially look at a high-level solution that will address the bigger problems. But then, as we drill down to specifics, we have to talk to individual people, understand what are their unique needs and requirements, accommodations, and then address it from there. We can't go with, okay, we have a policy for disability inclusion, we have a policy for LGBT inclusion, दोनों को मिला दिया, and that's not how it's going to work. The intersections are the more fun part of doing things, and that's why we need to understand from people and get there. And you can't blindly just go for it.
Okay. So, a very important question that we like to ask all our speakers: how do you process privilege and what are you doing to pay it forward?
Privilege. I think first thing as much as I beat myself beat myself up for being queer, being disabled, I recognize that I am very privileged compared to everyone else, and what I'm doing to pay it forward is just being that person of voice, of being a person whom people can reach out to, and doing things and as much as I can to help push things forward. And I'm trying to use my lived experience of being at that intersection of being disabled and queer, and trying to get conversations going on both the directions. So that's what I'm doing at my organization, and I'm also I'm not doing so much outside my organization, but I think this is my first step of stepping outside of my organization and doing things in this space.
So, do you see yourself maybe becoming an icon, or maybe becoming a role model for somebody, as you said, at the intersection of disability and being queer?
Um, at this moment, I don't think I've done so much, or I've not done anything that would make me an icon compared to everyone else who's already doing it. But potentially, maybe just someone they can reach out to, not like a icon, but maybe a mentor or just a support system. I think that's what I see myself as right now. Who knows? Maybe I become that icon for someone. And I, it's just too far out for me to think. I'd like to focus on the short goals versus that long goal of becoming an icon.
Okay. So, Karthik, what has you already said how you were okay with your disability, but then when you became aware of your queerness, you did realize that you have both identities at the same time. So, what was your coming out process like, and how has your support system evolved since then?
Um, yeah, I think coming to terms on my own was the biggest challenge, because I knew, being born disabled, I knew I was already marginalized and the systems were not cut out for me. But then I realized it's not just one thing, there's one more layer on top. I was like, can I change it? Can I not accept it? So I was in that phase of refusal of I wanted to not accept it, but then I realized I can't change myself, and my support system right now is primarily a lot of friends who encourage me to keep sharing my personal experience. My office colleagues are a good uh, pillar of support. They encourage me to can share my experience, and I'm being thrust in places where I can be that agent of change. So I think I derive support from my friends and colleagues and family. Um, not so much of support, but I see where they're coming from. So I don't want to don't want to rely too much and get disappointed.
But did you have a mentor or anybody who helped you realize, as you said, that you came to the acceptance of that you cannot change who you are? Did you have a mentor? And if you did not, do you now realize how much more important the role of a mentor could have been?
Yeah, I don't think I had a mentor at that stage of coming to terms with my intersectional identity, and I realized that possibly things could have been so much easier if I did have a mentor, and you know, so like I wish I had a mentor back then, but I guess that's how things were meant to be, and yeah.
Okay, Karthik, so let's end with a quick round of rapid fire. I would be asking you to say one line to the following groups, starting with what would you want to say to
Yeah,
parents?
so what would I say to the parents of queer kids? I'd say accept your children as they are. They're not any different, they're quite normal.
Government authorities.
They should talk to the people and understand the people, and not try to categorize them or put them in a bucket, because that's not going to do anything unless they understand the systemic problem and try to break it down. Nothing's going to happen.
Corporate Indian leaders.
Inclusion is not just about gender, there's a lot of intersectional identities. We need to work towards that, otherwise you're not doing anyone a favor.
And finally, the youth leaders of the queer movement.
Don't get stuck up in labels, because that's just putting everyone in silos. Understand there's intersections, and you have to get to that intersection before you can call yourself fully inclusive or pushing for a inclusive society.
Thank you so much, Karthik, for a very insightful conversation, and we got to know so much. And we really, really thank you for being a part of QueerTWENTY, the cohort of 2021.
Thank you for this opportunity. It was lovely talking to you. Looking forward for future conversations and discussions.